Rocksteady Zebek versus Harold, no last name, but a very big sword to make up for his mono name. And this is incredibly exciting because we are finally going to see the God Valley incident in all of its glory, and it has started right here, right now, in this here chapter. But to start this video, this happens to be one of those extremely rare chapters where I think the cover story actually has a more shocking bombshell than the chapter content itself, because the name of the allegedly dead hero of Wano has been revealed, and it belongs to Kuzuki Moria. Now this is wild, but not a complete surprise, because a Wano Moria theory has existed for at least 7 years, and it hinged mainly on the idea that Moria's family name Gecko is not taken from the animal, but actually the Japanese word Gekko, meaning moonlight. And if those kanji look familiar to you, it's because they are the exact same kanji that form the word Kuzuki, just reversed, with Kuzuki also essentially meaning moonlight. So Gecko, I should say Kuzuki Moria, left Wano and just reversed his name to create a funky alias. This is a theory that I'd not covered on this channel because there's some stuff I come across that I find a little bit too crazy, but you know what? It's often the case in One Piece that the crazier a theory is, the more likely it is to be true, and it's the reasonable theories you got to watch out for because those ones often turn out to be false. I am pretty blown away by this though, and I feel like a whole Gecko Moria re-examination is now in order because knowing this changes everything I thought I knew about Moria. And the most immediate change is that my respect for this man has skyrocketed to levels that I never thought a man of this heavy-set build could possibly reach, because it recontextualizes Moria's battle with Kaido on Wano. Moria likely wasn't just there to fight battle Kaido for the sake of rivalry and glory and all that. Moria was probably there to liberate his country from Kaido. And it was in that effort, that noble effort, that each and every member of his crew was killed. It's like the opposite of what happened with Kozuki Oden, who, brother, cousin of Moria, I don't know. But Oden took the long game approach and did his 5 years of naked dancing, which didn't seem like it accomplished much, but it did keep his followers and the people of Wano alive long enough to eventually liberate the nation. Whereas Moria, he took the more urgent approach and it cost him everything. It's a wonderful added layer of tragedy to our spring onion, and I actually wonder if Moria is going to have a level of appreciation towards Luffy for finally beating Kaido and liberating Wano. And instead of some sort of a funky enemy, Moria could now very much end up as our ally in the final war. However, this revelation is going to bring up all sorts of questions that no one is prepared for, and here is the first. Does this mean that Mr. Kuzuki Moria can read poneglyphs? Because the Kuzuki clan was supposedly all taught to read and write them, and here's another left field one. Could Perona, the girl that Moria adopted, be related to Toko, as they're the only two characters in this series who have these very distinctive eyes? And feel free to leave your own mind-bending Moria questions in the comments, because I feel like there is so much to dissect here, but also we have an actual chapter to talk about with all sorts of insanity of its own. And a big theme of this chapter is a setup for tragedy. We've had it too good in this flashback for too long, and it's time for Eiichiro Oda to get in there and ruin some lives. One Piece flashbacks are always soul-crushingly depressing in one way or another, and I know that narrative kick in the metaphorical nutsack is what we need to make our eventual victory feel all the more better. But sometimes, you know, I just really want to get in there and just make a small change to see how the world would have turned out. Like taking Higurashi's deception out of the fight between Oden and Kaido, or maybe advising a young Trafalgar Law to not trust this suspiciously Virgo-shaped marine. And as it turns out, I can now do exactly that. With the sponsor of this video, FableVerse, and keep watching till the end for a chance to win a $100 Amazon, Steam, or Crunchyroll gift card. But FableVerse is a free platform on voice.me where you can chat with your favorite anime and manga characters, rewrite canon and what-if stories, and play RPG adventures with your own character, your story, your world. With FableVerse, you can instantly hop into immersive and interactive stories featuring characters all across the anime spectrum and engage in wild what-if scenarios like what if Sanji joined Blackbeard's crew? He'd be making a lot of cherry pies, that's what had happened. But hey, at least he'd get to reunite with Charlotte Pudding, and the two of them can finally be together forever in Pirate Parisian. But the greatest thing about FableVerse to me is that with the C feature, you can generate phenomenal anime visuals to truly bring your story to life. And there is something for every anime fan. You've got action, romance, comedy, and all of the other genres. There's lots, so many. And I also love the sheer freedom that you have to make your own decisions, rewrite anime canon, and experience experience the limitless options of your own creativity. So you can and should check out FableVerse through my link in the description, and for a limited time, FableVerse is hosting a giveaway. Simply start a story and send at least one message in the Fable chat for a chance to win one of 5 $100 gift cards. And just make sure that you're logged in so that your entry counts. So definitely check it out. I've been having a lot of fun with this. And just go ahead, hit that start story button. But for now, it's back to you, me. We now cut to the Otto Jackson with a sulking Goldie Roger, and I think that Oda might want to be a little bit careful here, because we've had such little time directly with Roger overall in the series that all of these back-to-back chapters of him doing nothing but simping for Shaki may risk turning that simping into his defining quality as a character. This is so surreal though. Roger is upset because Shaki gave Rayleigh a special note telling him to come meet her, and there's a couple of things going on here. Even though Rayleigh's interested in Shaki, he is essentially ignoring her because he wants to maintain his freedom, which is something that even a post-married Rayleigh has still managed to accomplish. When we first met Shaki, she said that she hadn't seen Rayleigh in 6 months and speculated that, quote, he's got a girl somewhere and stays with her. I'm not worried about him. Going away for long stretches is natural for an ex-pirate. So Rayleigh can do whatever he wants, wherever he wants, and whoever he wants. It seems like a very open marriage. But I would say that Shaki's note is the perfect way to appeal to a man like Rayleigh. She doesn't say where to come find her, just come find me. And that is such a strong call to adventure that would appeal to any pirate. But I don't think that Rayleigh's refusal here is all about freedom, which I would say for Luffy. He would always refuse an offer like this, even in a world where he did feel some sort of attraction. His freedom and his adventure is paramount. And Rayleigh, he comes from the same book of freedom, but he's in a very different chapter. And I actually think that a big part of his refusal is Roger. Roger and Rayleigh aren't just captain and first mate, they're not even best friends. They refer to each other as partners. Obviously not romantic partners, but two people who have found themselves bound together and who formed the most formidable duo that this world has ever seen. If I was Rayleigh, I'd not be very keen on disturbing that dynamic, because I don't know if losing my best friend, if losing my pirating partner is going to be worth pursuing whatever this turns out to be. And I love that sort of maturity from Rayleigh, because that's exactly what we're not getting from Roger. Even after all of the everything, the section ends with Roger claiming that he will not give up, and they set sail to Hachinosu to go and see Shaki. And I do appreciate what's going on here. There could be a very Trojan War sort of story brewing. But at the same time, honestly, Roger is starting to lose me a bit. We don't know exactly when in time this scene takes place, but it's either 42 or 41 years ago. And either way, that makes Roger either 35 or 36 during this part of the chapter. And one of those numbers is my age. And if I was to act the way that Roger's acting, I'm pretty sure that I would be arrested and charged with stalking. So I'm really hoping that Roger comes to terms with this soon, because I get it. She's the most beautiful woman in the world and all that, but she's just not into you. And the longer that this continues, the more awkward it's gonna get. I do think it's gonna end in the next chapter, because we're heading into God Valley now, and surely that has to be a serious shift. And as we uncover this mystery, it turns out that a young Figland Garling played a much larger role in God Valley than we initially thought, as he is responsible for scouting and suggesting the location for the native hunting contest. He did a bit more than just scouting on his mission to God Valley, but we'll get to that. Garling mentioned something that's been brought up before, which is part of why God Valley was chosen. It was due to its abundant resources, whatever resources they so happen to be, sheep or bricks. But more interestingly, Garling also made an unexpected discovery of this location, something that even a Mr. Emu would take interest in. And how many things could that possibly be? As far as I'm aware, Emu's only interested in 3 things. The first is Nefertari Lily, and it's probably not her because I'm assuming she's very dead. But the second thing that Emu tends to take an interest in are poneglyphs, which are the objects in this world capable of undoing all of his hard-fought tyranny. I don't know if a poneglyph justifies this sort of hyping up by Garling though. So why don't we jump to the third thing that Emu's interested in, and this is a big one. What if Garling discovered the ancient weapon Uranus? We don't know when this came into the world government's possession, only that they have it in the modern day. And they've only very recently developed a fuel source to use its weaponry. And I guess when I say they, I mean the Vegapunks with their imitation Mother Flame. And maybe God Valley itself is the ancient weapon Uranus. When the Lucia was destroyed, Uranus appeared to be at least as big as that entire island. So no matter what it is or where it is, the weapon has to be at least island-sized, and that would be a convenient way to show how God Valley disappeared. You know, it just said, I have to go now, my planet needs me, and it floated up on into the air. I suppose we'll find out soon enough, but there is something so wonderfully hilarious about this page, and I know it has to be intentional. We've got Garling talking to the 5 elders, right? But we only see 4 of the 5 elders, and guess which old man is missing? That's right, former Saint J. Garcia Saturn, the man who Garling succeeded to become an Elder Star. This panel right here actually shows the current 5 elders: Marcus Mars, Topman, Walkure, Ethan Baron, Venus Duro, and Shepherd Jupiter. Oh, and of course, Figaland Garling. And I just thought that was a nice touch by Oda, like foreshadowing, except we already know exactly what's going to happen. But it's as if we've stepped back in time 40 years just to gloat about Saturn's death. But onwards to Hachinosu, and we pick up in Shaki's ripoff bar, which has developed a rather legendary status. In a weird way, Shaki alone has brought a sense of balance to the world of pirates, because her bar now functions kind of like a Continental from the John Wick movies. There are strict rules, no fighting, no pirating business in general, and it's become a pirate safe space where you can run into your mortal enemies and the only real choice you have is to sit down and have a drink with them. And there's a few interesting interactions that occur in the bar, but I want to point out Whitebeard first. He leaves because Roger and his crew are too noisy for him, and we know that that's something that changes in the future. Whitebeard is going to be slowly seduced by the Roger style of partying, as we saw in Odin's flashback after their 3-day battle. Before Roger shows up, though, we have a rather unceremonious announcement of Blackbeard's birth. Pretty big event, covered in a teeny tiny little bubble, as Rox is no longer simping for Shaki because he, I guess allegedly, has a woman and a child elsewhere. And this, what we're seeing right here, is 40 years ago. So it's likely happening right after the birth of Marshall D. Teach, who is currently 40 years old. And we don't see him or his mother yet. I have to imagine that there'll be a short cut to him or a tease after the God Valley incident, though. Something that shows, my Rox dad is dead, but I, Blackbeard man, will inherit his will. But I guess the most important thing to mention is that this is the first time we've seen Rox and Roger interacting, at least directly. They did speak to each other in the previous God Valley flashback, but we didn't see them on the same page, you know? And I feel like this should be a much bigger moment than it is. Their rivalry is referenced, and they clearly have history, ever so much history, but it's a bit of a shame that we've blasted past Rox and Roger in this flashback, because there are these 2 fantastic panels at the end of this section with a very serious Roger and Rox facing away from one another animalistically, and I want to know where this seriousness came from. And you can tell that there is something deep between them, because Oda uses this exact panel composition later to showcase the rift between Rox and Harold. So something similar is happening between Roger and Rox, and this is the most serious we've seen Roger in, I think, ever. I'm really struggling to remember an instance where Roger wasn't smiling or just acting like a whack job in some other way. This is such a heavy face, and it's being caused by the tension with Rox. And you can just tell that there is so much behind this face, like Roger is now feeling the weight of the world. There is so much more happening here than Oda is telling us. And my guess would be that he's hiding it because it has something to do with the Will of D, and though we're not quite ready to dive into that yet, I wonder if in the future we'll get a dedicated Roger flashback that goes a lot further back in time and fills in the gaps of all of his important relationships that this flashback is skipping over. To be fair, this is not the Roger flashback, it is the Loki, Harold, Rock, Shaki flashback. So the fact that the relationship between Rox and Harold is being prioritized shouldn't be surprising. And this chapter treats us to a full-on fight battle between Rox and Harold, which firstly made it looks amazing. Oda has managed to achieve this great balance of making both Harold and Rox look insanely powerful. And the reason why that's difficult to do is because giant characters, they tend to look very weak when they're being matched by human-sized people. If it's not drawn properly, the giants can just look kind of pathetic. But you can really viscerally feel the struggle of both Rox and Harold on these pages. I love it. And this is a rather tricky clash emotionally because I don't know if I'm really on board with either the ambition of Rox or Harold. I don't know if there's a right choice here. It does feel a lot like Harold is betraying Rox, and that's because he's agreed to the world government's deal to kill Rox. This is not a very nice thing to do to your friend, but I'm not sure if Harold would have necessarily had a better future, at least not that we're currently aware of, if he'd followed Rox instead. But also, the world government is never going to be the right answer in the long term, as Harold has already experienced. But what I really appreciate is that we have some flashbacks of Harold talking to miscellaneous humans all over the world, and they're all more or less saying the same thing, that they like and trust Harold, good dude, but they fear the concept of giants in general. There's just too much negative history. And you can see Harold struggling with that perception of violence and bloodlust that he is trying so hard to get away from. Which is a little bit ironic because as time passes, Harold's character design is becoming more angry and violent looking in that desperate search for peace. But this is the foundation as to why Harold eventually reforms Elbaf into a more peace-loving society that we see in the modern day. But these deep scars of the world are also likely what is going to, how shall we say, inspire Harold to rip off his horns. To at least aesthetically get rid of that tangible cue of fear. Although I do have another idea in regards to that. If Harold does continue to succeed in his negotiations with the world government, they might make it a sick condition for him to join, for Harold to rip off his horns in front of them as proof that he's leaving that nature behind and he is becoming one of them. Something like that. It just feels like a world government-y thing to do. But then again, if I'm Harold, I do get where he's coming from. He has an entire civilization to care for and protect, and it would be very difficult to tie all of their lives to whatever the crap it is that Rox is doing, which I don't know if Harold really knows what Rox is doing. We certainly don't. And one of the more tragic ways this flashback could end is by revealing that Rox's ambition may have liberated the world in the same way that Luffy eventually will. That the greatest villain in history could have been this close to being its greatest hero. But it was Harold's decision that prevented it. Although regardless of what Rox was trying to do, this does look to be the case. This chapter mentions that Harold and Rox, their friendship, it's over and they would not meet again until the day of the incident. So it looks like Harold is going to be present on God Valley, and more so than Roger or Garp, Harold may be the deciding factor in this conflict that leads to the demise of Rox D. Zebek. I will say that Eiichiro Oda has also done a very great job of bookending this chapter, because the two biggest revelations are the cover page and the final page, such a satisfying experience to start on a high and end on a high. But assorted people on the internet, it is my tremendous honor to say that we are actually here. I didn't believe it would happen when this flashback began, but this chapter has ended 39 years ago on the island of God Valley, just before the incident is about to begin. And at this point, I would be so mad if Oda didn't show us exactly what happened. We have to be going into it because I don't think there's another opportunity. The story of Rox is happening right here and now, but it's not just his story, because this chapter ends by showing us twin gingers, baby Shanks and baby Shamrock. Not only that, but also their mother, who I guess is a fairly standard Oda-looking woman who we only see from behind. And it would be a very Oda thing to do to just never show her face at all. But that's already enough to kill the crazy Shaki or Shanks' mother theory that's been doing the rounds on YouTube, Reddit, and Twitter, spreading like a very crimson STI. And I guess this means that Shanks and Shamrock are only half world noble. They aren't pure because their mother doesn't appear to be a world noble. It's almost certainly a woman who Garling decided to intercourse during his time on God Valley, which was a year before the end of this chapter, so the timeline works out pretty well. And thematically, this also works out pretty well. Biologically, they're half world noble and half not a complete prick, but when we've got twins, we can simplify that. We give one of them the world noble heritage, and the other one the not being a complete prick heritage. They're both adorable though. We've got Shanks on the right as the happy smiley baby, and Shamrock on the left as the more pensive and contemplative baby. And I don't feel like it's fair for Oda to show me baby Shamrock. How am I supposed to be so thoroughly disgusted by Shamrock now that I've seen him like this? He's too cute. However, this might explain why the Figurland family have a bit of a stigma around them. The Five Elders in particular are quite wary of Garling in their previous encounters, and they had a poor opinion of the family in One Piece Film Red, which was where the Figurland name was first used. So here's the thing, world nobles, they obviously take wives, and I mean that quite literally. They kidnap wives from the lower realms, and sometimes, as a result, children are produced, just like Jewelry Bonnie. However, those children are then swiftly dumped, and this is the first case we've seen of one of those children, being Shamrock, having been granted the title of world noble and being allowed to live among their society, even though he is only a filthy half-god. I would suspect that most world nobles are, pure blood, just because of how thoroughly naturally inbred they all look. So we've got ourselves a non-pure blood here, and that could be why the Figland family are treated the way we've seen them thus far. But with Ida Estrid, Blackbeard's off-screen mother, and now Shanks and Shamrock's mother, this has become the most mother-heavy flashback in One Piece to date, and it also includes the heavy mother herself, Charlotte Lin Lin. And that's a problem, because mothers have a tendency to die in flashbacks. In fact, one of them already has. So whoever this woman is, I'm not feeling great about Shanks' mother. Not good at all. She is probably in for a rather rough fate. And it could even be as twisted as having her being turned into a rabbit for the native hunting contest and being hunted down and killed by Garling himself. That is a very real and very sad possibility that we may need to prepare ourselves for as we enter the God Valley incident.